The Hidden Life of the Prophet Muhammad. A novel by Dr. A. Ahmed. This book continues the story of the Arab sugar daddy and the beautiful Indian girl, and the story of the Indian child bride and the old Arab husband, and the story of the Indian Miss World and the rage of Muslims of the world, and the story of Christina and the complete Jew, and also the story of the tears of God. They have been written in English and translated into Arabic by the author Dr. Ahmed. This tale resonates with genuine love, strong resilience, and steadfast courage. I invite you to accompany me as I continue narrating the story of the rare, fabulous beauty of the Indian daughter, Ifat Khan, and her extremely beautiful mother, Rehana Khan. Before we dive in the tapestry of the story, I would like to remind the reader this novel is narrated in 6 books. Book 1, The Arab Sugar Daddy and the Beautiful Indian Girl. Book 2, The Indian Child Bride and the Old Arab Husband. Book 3, The Indian Miss World and the Rage of Muslims of the World. Book 4, Christina and the Complete Jew. Book 5, The Tears of God, Jews, Blacks, and Muslim Women. And Book 6, The Hidden Life of the Prophet Muhammad. This is an intriguing epic story which exhibits resilience, love, and sacrifice. Book 6. Exposing the unspoken life story of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad. Copyrights. All rights are reserved. No part of this book may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of the author, except by a reviewer, who may quote brief passages from a review for printing in a public newspaper, general magazine, school journal, or university article. All characters in this novel are fictional, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is merely coincidental. Chapter 29. The First Mission of Mr. Jeremiah. Muhammad Jeremiah entered the jail at the age of 30 and was 49 at the time of his release. Before he left the prison, the Islamic group leader told him that he would not be able to find his way back in the society. He convinced him that his criminal record would haunt him forever. It would prevent him from getting a job and decent accommodation. He would be labeled by society as a dangerous criminal. He would always be watched by the police. Since he entered jail as a child abuser, he would be forced to wear an electronic tracking device, which would allow the police to monitor his whereabouts. Wherever he would eventually decide to live, the police were obligated to inform the neighborhood about his crimes and warn them to be careful of him. He would not be allowed to be near children. He had even been denied visitation rights to his own children. If he gets married again and have children, he will not be allowed to be near his children or even change their diapers, etc. and etc. After painting a bleak picture of his future, he was advised by the leader of his Islamic group in prison to contact the imam of a specific mosque and ask for help. When he came out of prison, Muhammad was homeless and jobless. He followed the advice of the leader and contacted the imam of that mosque. The imam received him gladly, helped him to find a place to rent, and pledged to pay his rent regularly until he could stand on his own 2 feet. When Muhammad Jeremiah attended the mosque regularly, and did not go back to his drugs and alcohol addictions, the imam of the mosque convinced an African immigrant to give his 20-year-old daughter as a wife to the African-American convert. When the girl was contracted in marriage to him, and he slept with her, Muhammad was shocked to find out that she was a virgin. Therefore he went to the imam of the mosque, kissed his hands and feet, and thanked him 1,000,000 times for his first virgin. After his marriage, the imam of the mosque found a job for Muhammad in a Somali shop that distributing halal meats and other ethnic commodities. Someone rightly said, a Muslim can steal, kill, tell lies, commit adultery, and marry and sleep with underage girl, but he will never ever eat pork or touch unhalal meat. Although externally Muhammad Jeremiah appeared to have changed and forsook his old ways, but old sexual predator festered within. He used the Somali shop as a place to lure his victims. Many immigrant Muslim women came to his shop, and he enticed them in sexual deals. most of those women were ignored by their polygamist husbands. Their husbands were involved in secret marriages to younger girls and spent much of their time and energies with their young Muslim wives. As per the Quran, every Muslim man is permitted to wed 4 wives at the same time. Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 3. Muhammad Jeremiah not only satisfied the sexual needs of the sexually frustrated wives, but also paid them money for sex. Muhammad Jeremiah continued with illicit sexual encounters with multiple partners until he got into trouble with one of his partner's husband. The woman was an Iraqi immigrant whose husband had recently married a younger girl. After his second marriage, the husband rarely slept with her. For her, not only did Muhammad satisfy her sexually, but gave her free merchandise and little cash in hand. The Iraqi woman liked her secret lover and began to frequent his shop. Her husband did not suspect her behavior until he learned from some of his relatives that his wife was involved in an adulterous relation with a Negro man. He followed her one day to that Somali shop and spied on her. He watched her until she entered the shop. However, when he came after some time to enter the shop, he found its door was locked. He knew that his wife went in and did not come out. It was inconceivable that the shop closed with his wife still inside. He surmised that his Arab wife was having sex with the black Zanji or Negro inside the shop. If he discovered that his Arab wife was involved in fornication with a black demon, the Arab man would not be so outraged. His Arab wife that has sexual intercourse with a Zanji whose hair like raisins and his skin as black as the night was too much for him. He waited until the door reopened and his wife came out. He attacked her immediately and stabbed her repeatedly in the chest right on the threshold of the shop. Then, he barged into the shop, with his knife in his bloody hands and tried to attack the Zanji man. However, Muhammad Jeremiah overpowered him and subdued him until the police came in. To cut long story short, the Iraqi woman died on her way to the hospital, and her husband and Muhammad were arrested. Her husband confessed his crime and got sentenced to 10 years in prison. Muhammad Jeremiah also admitted his affair with the deceased woman, but the court did not hold him criminally liable. The Somali shop owner kicked him out, and his African wife left him and filed for divorce on the ground of marital unfaithfulness. The court accepted her application and approved her divorce from him. Muhammad Jeremiah became so destitute after the chain of events overtook his life. His ex-wife used to have a nice job, and he used to depend on her before he fell into ignominy. Whatever money he made in the Somali shop was spent on his sexual dalliances. It was at this time, when he was breaking, one of his Muslim brothers in the mosque approached him and offered him a work to do. The Imam of the mosque recommended Muhammad Jeremiah for that mission. At that time, Muhammad was living on what little money he managed to get from welfare. Therefore, he gladly accepted the deal. He was paid an advance of $15,000 and was promised to receive the same amount after accomplishing the mission. Chapter 31. Funds for Dawah. 1 month has passed since 2 people claiming to be FBI agents had abducted Susan Johnson. The police could not find her, or any clues leading to her whereabouts or discover her remains. The police considered her case one of the most mysterious crimes ever committed on American soil. When the investigators had almost given up hope, a homicide case involving an African-American Muslim began to open some doors. The man was murdered in his apartment, and no one knew about it until decomposition had set in, leading the neighbors to call the matter in. When the police arrived, they found that the victim had been strangled with no forensic clues left behind. The victim had an extensive criminal rap sheet, but had kept his nose clean for over a year. The police were unable to link his murder to drugs or gang rivalry. The neighbors testified that the deceased was a deeply religious man. All his neighbors were Muslims, and all confirmed him as a regular member of a nearby mosque. He attended mosque regularly and behaved well within the Muslim society. The autopsy showed that no traces of drugs, alcohol, or even tobacco. The police wondered what the motive for the murder of such a religious man could be. The first discrepancy they found was the fact that the victim had a bank account. Prior to his murder, it was established that he was jobless and scraping to make ends meet. He was registered as a welfare recipient, but his account showed sizable transfers from an FBI agent. There were 4 tranches of $15,000, of which extraordinarily little was spent. That FBI agent was Muslim and a regular at the same mosque attended by the victim. When questioned, he claimed that the transfers were charitable in nature, made to a Muslim brother in need. The reason did not make sense because there were many other African American Muslims in the mosque who seemed to be more in need than the victim. Naturally, the police pressed on with their questioning, but the FBI agent pleaded the fifth and could not justify his $60,000 donation. The first theory that the police built was that there was a criminal or terrorist plot underway, and the victim was murdered when he refused to play his part in it. Therefore, the police took in many of the African Americans from that mosque for interrogation. Since the prime suspect was originally an immigrant Muslim from India, Indian and Pakistani Muslims were also questioned. Even the mosque imam was interrogated by the police. Investigations into what was essentially a hostile environment yielded nothing. Once again, the case looked like it was about to become another unsolved case. Inconsistencies crept in when the police began to dig into the source of those $60,000 that were transferred to the victim's account. The suspect claimed that he was running an Islamic charitable organization set up to help new converts to Islam. He even quoted a verse from the Quran which commands that the newly converts to Islam should receive money from the Islamic treasury, Quran 9, verse 60. He claimed further that the money came from wealthy Muslim donors who lived in countries like India and Pakistan. The police remained unconvinced by the shaky explanation. The police knew that Muslims in America send financial help to poor Muslims in the Third World. It was unheard of the other way around. If the suspect had said the money was coming from rich Arab countries such as Saudi Arabia or Gulf countries, his story would probably hold water. The police knew that the suspect had lied and decided to extend their investigation to the suspect's last movements, uncovering his last trip to India. On his last visit, he took a 1-week break and claimed that he traveled to India and participated in the burial of his father. At that time, his police department did not doubt his claim. Given the unusual implications of the money transfers, the police decided to find out whether his visit to India was genuine, or if it was cover for something else. Therefore, the American FBI referred the case of the suspected FBI agent to the Mumbai Anti-Terrorist Police Department and requested them to investigate his last visit to India. The Indian police found out that on his last visit to India, the suspected American FBI agent, Malik Reza, stayed in a 5-star hotel at Mumbai. The inquiry on his activities during his stay revealed that he opened an account in the State Bank of India, and $250,000 were transferred from the account of a wealthy business tycoon to the suspect's account. Accordingly, the Mumbai CID police arrested the wealthy Muslim man and interrogated him. The wealthy man purchased his freedom through huge bribe. Therefore, the corrupt Indian police did not apply on him their third-degree interrogation method. On the same day he was arrested, his statement was taken. He claimed that he donated that huge amount of money for the Islamic Dawah in America, spreading Islam in America, and for the help of poor Black American Muslims. Therefore, his statement backed the donation business, and he was allowed to go free. Likewise, the American police could not detain Malik Reza, after the wealthy Indian man, who deposited the amount in his account, confirmed his story. Chapter 32. The Personal Efforts. Meanwhile, the loving American husband Mark Johnson did not leave any available means in trying to solve the mysterious kidnap of his beloved Indian wife Susan Johnson. He already came to the inevitable conclusion that those who kidnapped his wife were Muslim terrorists who came from overseas or homegrown terrorists. Then, they used local Muslim terrorists and planned the kidnap and murder of his wife. Although he expected by then that those ruthless terrorists had already killed his beloved wife, Mark was still determined never to leave a stone unturned in finding those culprits who kidnapped and murdered her. He spent many hours during the day standing in front of the FBI building and observing who came in and who went out. He expected one day to spot one of those two persons who came to his house, fooled him, and kidnapped his beloved wife. He spent 1 month standing and sometimes going in circles around that building without seeing any face that resembled those two faces that came to his house on that fateful evening. He visited many public parks and crowded malls and searched for those two criminals but could not find them. Now and then, he called the police and inquired about any new developments in the case of his wife, and always received a negative answer. Finally, the police forbade him from calling them. He was told that if anything surfaced concerning the kidnap of his wife, the police would let him know. Then, he was told strictly that if he phoned again, he would be arrested and charged with harassment. After he failed to find the two kidnappers and understood that the police were helpless, Mark decided to do his investigation by using illegal means. He still believed in the inside job theory. Therefore, he found a computer expert, bribed him with a large amount of money, and asked him to hack the computer of the FBI's payroll department and find out whether there were Muslim names listed in that department. He paid the hacker $20,000 and pledged to pay him $50,000 after the job was successfully done. The hacker was an immigrant from China. He bought a brand new computer and rented an apartment under fake identifications. Then, he installed an internet connection in his new apartment. After spending a few days in that apartment, the Chinese chap succeeded in hacking the payroll computer of the building in question, and obtained a huge list of the employees and workers of the FBI. The list included some foreign names of immigrants, which Mark Johnson thought were all Muslims. However, after checking each name through the Google search page, he discovered there were names of Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, and other Chinese and Japanese religions. He omitted all those names. The list was becoming smaller day by day. After a week, he had only around 37 names of Muslims left on his list. At first, he decided to use the phone book and find the addresses and phone numbers of those Muslims. However, he dismissed that idea because he understood that he would not be able to contact those employees of the FBI without raising some suspicions and running into trouble with the police. Therefore, Mark decided to use his experience of marrying a foreign woman who was from an Indian background. He knew the young woman who came with that black man and kidnapped his wife was either Indian or Pakistani. He remembered that his wife talked to her in Urdu language, and that indicated she was a Muslim, who was either from an Indian or Pakistani origin. The names that the kidnappers gave him were not among those names he found in the list of the FBI employees. He guessed those two kidnappers used fake names and fake police ID cards. He remembered that his wife one time told him that an Indian girl would not agree to marry a Negro man because Indians have serious issues with black color. Moreover, his wife informed him that most of the Indian families would not allow their daughters to marry white men because they believed that a white man would not keep a marriage relationship for long. Therefore, Mark understood that there was no relation between the black man and the East Indian or Pakistani girl. The man was old and black, and the girl was young and beautiful. Therefore, Mark concluded that the black man might just be hired by someone as a cover-up. He also doubted the possibility that such a young Indian girl could be a kidnapper, or a killer, or used by terrorists to execute such a carefully planned plot. She would either be forced to join the plan or someone remarkably close to her would convince her to participate in the plot. Such a close person would be either her father or her husband. After drawing his new conclusion, Mark thought there should be a close relative to that young Indian girl working in the police force, and he was the one who used his daughter or wife to accompany that evil black man and execute the plot. Through his search, he understood that Indian and Pakistani Muslims use different spells of commonly used Muslim names from Arab and African Muslims. For example, Pakistani and Indian names such as Abdullah, Mahmud, Reza, and Muhammad were spelled and written differently by Arab Muslims, Abdullah, Mahmud, Rida, and Muhammad. Moreover, no Arab or African Muslims use the last name Khan. This new conclusion dropped the list down to a couple of names, Malik Reza and Ridwan Khan. The commonly used Indian and Pakistani family name of Khan tempted Mark to discard the first name, Malik Reza, and concentrate on Ridwan Khan. However, since there were only 2 remaining names, he decided to investigate both of them. He checked the phone book and found 5 people having the combination of the 2 names Ridwan Khan, and only 1 person that has Malik Reza. Therefore, his first pick was to check out Malik Reza. Mark Johnson followed the address and went to the house of Malik Reza. When he arrived at the address, he discovered that Malik Reza was living in a house and not an apartment in a building. So there was no way that he could use bribes and consult the property owner or other tenants. He was scared to walk straight to the house and inquire about Mr. Malik Reza. Being a white man, he knew he had nothing in common that he could use as an excuse to talk to an immigrant from India or Pakistan. He would not possibly go to someone and ask him whether he had a young wife or a young daughter by the name of Shamim Siddiqui, the name of the female kidnapper. The only thing Mark decided to do was to hide somewhere and keep watching that house until hopefully he would spot the wicked young woman who came with that evil black man and kidnapped his wife. Mark spent 3 days watching that house without seeing the woman in question. Every day he saw a man from an Asian background coming in and going out all alone from the house. He even followed him to his workplace at the FBI building and to the nearby mosque. The man was a regular attendee of the mosque. Mark Johnson knew that mosque very well. It was the same mosque his beloved wife and he had gone to in the past, fooled its imam, and claimed to be new converts to Islam. He was worried that if he followed the man inside the mosque the imam might recognize him. He remembered how the African-American Muslim man, who was an ambassador of the United States of America in the Democratic Republic of South of Sudan, had accused them of deceiving a recognized religious leader and obtaining American passports through deception. So, to be on the safe side, he dismissed the idea of returning to that mosque again. Therefore, Mark decided to forget about Malik Reza and go and search for the wicked young woman in the houses of the 5 people who had named Ridwan Khan. He thought Malik Reza was a single man living all alone. However, his 6 senses had a different intuition at the last moment. His experience of living in a Muslim country for 8 months in North Sudan taught him that most Muslim men would like to lock their young wives inside their houses as if they were prisoners or dangerous creatures. Therefore, he decided before he would drop Malik Reza from his search list, he should find out whether there was a young wife locked up inside that house. On the 4th day, he waited until Malik Reza left his house, and then after waiting for 10 minutes he crossed the street, went straight to the house gate, and pressed the bell. He heard immediately the voice of a woman responding to his call, and saying in English with a heavy Indian accent, "My husband has just gone to work." He heard her voice but could not see her. He wanted to see her face. Therefore, he just continued to press the bell until she showed up at the door of one of the rooms. "She is the one." The young woman also recognized Mark Johnson and immediately retreated and locked herself inside the room. Mark called her to come out, but she did not respond. He knew that if he decided to go and inform the police, the woman meanwhile might inform her husband or run away and hide somewhere else. Mark decided to finish the job by himself, get hold of the young woman, and then inform the police. He forced his way inside the house and went directly to the room where he saw the young woman come out and talk to him. He knocked hard on the door, but she did not respond or open it. Mark expected that the young woman would phone her husband and call him in. He understood that when her husband returned, he would not hesitate for a second to shoot and kill him. A person in Reza's position would do anything to cover up that evil plot. Mark threatened to call the police if the woman would not open the door and talk to him. The young woman ignored his threats. As Mark anticipated, she did not waste a second, dialed her husband's cell phone of her husband, and informed him who had come to their house and was trying to break in and get her. However, before her husband arrived, Mark managed to force the door open and enter in. The young woman did not scream and alert the neighbors. She did not want anyone to know about what was going on in her house. She understood that the neighbors would call 911, and that was the last thing she wanted to happen. Mark also understood why the young woman was not screaming and calling for help when he broke her door and came by force inside her room. She just pointed her hand at the door, showing that he should have left immediately. When he refused, she began to push him out. Mark was able to overpower the young woman and began to question her. He told her that she was the one who came over a month before to his house along with another black man, claimed to be an FBI agent, and kidnapped his wife. He asked her to tell him what they had done to his wife. The young woman decided to play the game of not knowing English and talk to him in Urdu. Mark refused to believe her and told her she had just talked to him in English and said, "My husband has just gone to work." Moreover, he reminded her that that day when she came to his house, she was speaking to them in English. The young woman wanted to gain time and tried to prevent Mark from calling the police. She started talking in English, told him that her husband is a devout Muslim man, and hence strictly instructed her not to open the door to anyone or talk to any strange man in his absence. Mark did not buy that religious excuse. Then, she threatened to call the police on him, and told him her husband was a big officer in the police force. Mark ignored her words. He took out his cell phone and began to dial 911. The young woman assaulted him, kicked the phone out of his hand, and prevented him from calling the police. The cell phone fell out of Mark's hand and went underneath the couch. Mark went on his knees and tried to find his cell phone, but the woman began to push and kick him. Mark avoided hitting her, but she kept on beating him. Finally, he was forced to fight with her when she became too violent. He managed to hold her from her back and control both her hands. Nevertheless, she used her right foot and kicked him in his privates. It was so painful, but Mark kept holding her. When he got a chance, he hit her on her head and rendered her unconscious. She collapsed in front of him. Then, he carried her unconscious body and laid it on the couch. After that, he went on his knees again and began to search for his cell phone. Before Mark could find his cell phone, he heard the sound of a car arriving and stopped in front of the outside gate. He looked quickly at the outside door and spotted Malik Reza jumping out of his vehicle and rushing towards the house. Mark understood he wasted so much time in trying to arrest the young woman. He was supposed to dial the police number as soon as he discovered she was the one who took part in the kidnap of his wife. Now he was worried that her FBI husband might shoot and kill him, and close the chapter of his wife's involvement in the kidnap and murder of his wife. Malik Reza would say he killed him in self-defense after he received a call from his wife informing him a man broke in and attempted to rape her. Mark knew he would not be able to make his escape through the main gate. Therefore, he ran downstairs and locked the basement door behind him. When he reached the basement, he was so shocked when he saw his wife tied up on a bed with a big tape on her mouth. The place had an unbelievably bad odor. He understood that his wife was imprisoned all this time in this filthy place and fed like an animal. His wife recognized him, but she could not utter a word. Before he could attempt to release his wife, Mark heard someone trying to force the basement door open. He knew it was Malik Reza. He ran back to the door, kept both hands on it, and prevented Malik's attempt to force it open. The door was locked by a latch from within. Then, Mark heard Malik shouting at him and ordering him to open the door. He threatened to knock the door down, come in, shoot him, and kill his wife too. Mark did not respond to his threats and continued to hold the door. Malik began to hammer the door with a big tool. Mark knew he would not hold the door forever. He knew Malik would do anything to break the door, come in, and kill them. He also knew he had no phone or any means of communicating with the outside world. He understood that if he shouted from the basement and called for help, no one would hear him. Even so, he raised his voice and called for rescue. Before anyone could come to their rescue, Malik Reza managed to knock on the door. Mark caught hold of his right hand where there was a revolver and began to fight with him. Some of the neighbors phoned the police and reported that they heard loud gunshots in the Reza's house. Moreover, they said they spotted a white man standing in front of the house a few minutes before they heard the firing. When the police arrived, there was dead silence in the house. As if there was no one inside that house. More than 7 police officers entered the house fully armed and ready for a possible encounter with the shooter. When they entered the first room, they found Mrs. Reza still lying unconscious on the couch. Some of them proceeded further and began to search the other upstairs rooms. They could not find anyone. Then, they began to file in one line and descend through the knockdown basement door. The basement had very dim light. 2 officers used their torches, and the first sight that caught their attention was the body of someone lying down on his stomach, and a pool of blood formed around him. The second sight was a woman tied up on the only available bed in the basement. Her mouth was sealed with big tape, but her eyes were wide open and full of fear. The last person they saw was a white man sitting in a corner. As soon as their sharp lights fell on his face, he lifted up his hands and surrendered. Chapter 33. The case remains open. When the police confronted her with the undeniable evidence of her involvement in the kidnap of Susan Johnson, Mrs. Reza admitted her crime. She confessed that her husband had received a $250,000 from a wealthy Indian Muslim man in Mumbai, and he was promised to receive $750,000 if he masterminded and carried out successfully the kidnap of the blasphemous Indian slum girl, Aphrodite Khan, Susan Johnson. According to her confession, after her husband returned from Mumbai, he shared the kidnap plot with the imam of his mosque where he regularly attended and performed his prayers. The imam was originally an Egyptian Muslim immigrant. His name was Imam Fawad Abdul Rauf. He welcomed the idea and issued a fatwa endorsing it. Then, Imam Abdul Rauf introduced Reza to an African American in the mosque and told him to involve him in the kidnap plan, and that man was Muhammad Jeremiah. Malik Reza was the one who paid $30,000 to Muhammad Jeremiah and involved him in the kidnap of the apostatized Indian Muslim woman who dared to call the Prophet Muhammad, my foot, and spat on the Holy Quran. The FBI agent, Malik Reza, convinced his Indian wife to join in the kidnap of the blasphemous woman. He was the one who coached Muhammad Jeremiah and his wife and forged their FBI identifications. Reza used his position in the FBI to locate Aphrodite Khan/Christina Lewinsky, who had taken the Bureau's advice to change her name and relocate. It was then a simple matter for him to find out her new address and name. Then, Mrs. Reza explained why her husband decided to use her and the African American man. She was 22 years old, and Muhammad Jeremiah was 50 years old. Reza anticipated that the age difference and the racial background of both would not lead Susan Johnson and her husband to suspect any foul plan or relationship between the two. He knew that Susan, as an Indian woman, would know a young girl like his wife, who was also from an Indian background, would not fall in love or marry a black man no matter what he might offer her. In addition to that, the age difference between the two would make it impossible to believe there was a relationship between the two. Moreover, Reza expected that by sending a young woman with the black man, the victim, and her family would suspect little, if anything, amiss. The plan of the FBI agent, Malik Reza, worked perfectly well, and Mohammed Jeremiah and Mrs. Reza, Shabnam Reza, fooled Susan Johnson and her husband. The duo kidnapped Susan and brought her to Reza's house. She was imprisoned in their basement and tortured daily. Reza could not kill her because he agreed with his Indian accomplices that someone would come from their side and murder her, and the act should be on tape. Then and only then, Reza would get the rest of his $1 million. Meanwhile, Reza and Shabnam told Susan Johnson that they would not kill her if her husband agreed to pay some ransom money and stop the circulation of the provocative movie and the distribution of the offensive book. They fooled her that they were not keen in killing her if her husband fulfilled their demands. They just wanted to gain time and keep her under their control until her appointed killer, Rashid Sheikh, would arrive from London, the UK. The trouble started when Mohammed Jeremiah wanted more money than was originally agreed upon. Reza paid him another $30,000 to appease him. Nevertheless, Mohammed Jeremiah demanded that Malik Reza should use his influence in the Muslim community to find him a young Indian girl to wed. Reza told him that due to his age, race, and black skin color, no Indian girl would agree to marry him even if he was the last man on the surface of the earth. Mohammed Jeremiah was convinced by some Somali Muslim men in the mosque that he could travel to Somalia and marry at the same time for Somali girls as young as 9 and 10 years old, virgins. Therefore, Muhammad decided to leave his native land, immigrate to the pure Muslim land of Somalia, join the Al-Shabaab jihadi group, and enjoy his Somali child brides. In anticipation of this plan, he decided to take another big bite out of his financier. He explained his plan to Malik Reza and demanded another $40,000. When Reza refused to pay, Muhammad threatened to report him to the police. This time, Reza did not bend to the threat. He knew that Muhammad would do nothing because he was directly implicated. To scare Reza into compliance, Mohammed Jeremiah spread the word among his circle of Somali friends. When Reza heard it from some Somalis in the mosque, he approached the Egyptian Imam, Fawad Abdul Rauf, and informed him that Mohammed Jeremiah was becoming a loose cannon and a threat to their organization. Imam Abdul Rauf instructed Reza to silence the African American men before it was too late. Following the advice of the Imam, Malik Reza went to Mohammed Jeremiah and murdered him in his apartment. The Egyptian Imam and the Indian FBI agent thought that the murder of the African American man would close that chapter forever. Although the murder of Mohammed Jeremiah led the police to suspect the involvement of Malik Reza, still the police could not prove it. Malik Reza was cleared by his Indian accomplice, and the police reached a dead end in the murder of the African American. While the investigation into the murder was going on, Reza contacted his accomplices overseas and requested the delay of the arrival of Rashid Sheikh. However, as soon as his name was cleared of the murder of the African American man, Reza contacted Muhammad Khan in London and gave him the green light. Shortly, the assassin Rashid Sheikh flew from the UK to the USA. It so happened that on the day Mark Johnson, through his personal efforts and investigation, reached the house, Reza took off from work and went to the hotel to pick up the assassin. It was either a rare chance or a divine intervention that on the same day Susan was supposed to be murdered, her husband reached her and snatched her from the bloody hands of those evil Muslim terrorists. Surprisingly, the police could not build any link between the kidnap of Susan Johnson and the murder of Mohammed Jeremiah. All the links were there and as clear as the sun. They just needed a little effort from a keen investigator. Mohammed Jeremiah was the old black man. His fake name was Rick Adams, who came with the Indian or Pakistani young woman, Shabnam Reza. Her fake name was Shamim Siddiqui, who claimed to be FBI agents and kidnapped Mrs. Johnson. The kidnap pointed to an inside job. Therefore, those kidnappers had a link with the FBI, and that link was Malik Reza. The day Mark Johnson, through his private efforts and investigation, reached the house where his beloved wife was imprisoned. Was supposed to be the last day for Susan Johnson. On that day, the appointed killer, Rashid Sheikh, arrived from London and stayed in a hotel near the international airport. Then, he phoned Malik Reza, informed him about his arrival, and gave him the address of the hotel where he was staying. Reza left his house and headed to the hotel to fetch the killer and bring him to his house to finish the job and finalize the deal. However, while Reza was halfway, he received that frantic call from his wife. When he learned that the husband of Susan Johnson discovered the hiding place of his imprisoned wife, Malik knew the only way to stop him from exposing the plot was to silence him. To kill him first and then bring the appointed killer of his wife and murder her too. That day, Reza and his accomplices planned something, but God planned something different. Instead of killing Mark Johnson, Malik Reza was killed by his gun. When the police arrived, his wife, Shabnam Reza, was revived, arrested, and taken into custody. She was confronted with all the undeniable pieces of evidence. She revealed the entire kidnap and assassination plot from A to Z. The appointed killer, Rashid Sheikh, was arrested on the same day from his hotel room. On the following day, Imam Fawad Abdul Rauf was dragged from his mosque in front of the entire congregation after handcuffs were placed on his hands and thrown behind bars where he belonged. The British anti-terrorist police officer, Muhammad Khan, was arrested along with his father, Professor Sajid Khan. The last detainees were the three wealthy Muslim Indians who initiated the plot and financed it. Those three Mohammedan men were known for their charitable deeds in India, and they built many mosques in Bombay. On that day, the wife Susan Johnson was snatched from the mouth of the lion by her loving husband, Mark Johnson. After her miraculous rescue, she was taken directly to the hospital and kept in the ICU. She was treated for many diseases and wounds all over her body. She spent 1 week in the hospital before she was discharged and allowed to join her loving family. When she was questioned by the police, Susan revealed how she was kidnapped, imprisoned, beaten, raped, and tortured by Malik Reza and his two accomplices. Many times, the Muslim FBI Malik Reza agent raped her in front of his Indian wife Shabnam Reza. He used to strip her naked and rape her while his young Indian wife standing inside in the basement and watching the brutal rape. The Muslim husband Malik Reza convinced his Muslim wife Shabnam Reza that the Quran allows him to rape his captive woman Susan Johnson because she became his sabaya, or an infidel slave girl. He quoted Surah Al-Nisa 4, verse 3. He also referred to the example of the Prophet Muhammad with his captive woman Safiya bint Huyay. Muhammad raped Safiya after he murdered her Jewish husband. The FBI also interrogated Mark Johnson and tried to find out how he discovered the hiding place of his kidnapped wife. Mark refused to reveal to the police how he discovered the den of the Muslim terrorists who planned, kidnapped, imprisoned, tortured, and almost killed his wife. The police tried to nail Mark on the charge of not cooperating with the law, but his lawyer cleared him of that malicious accusation. The police also tried to charge him with illegally breaking into someone's private property, but that charge was nullified by his lawyer too. Moreover, the police strove hard to implicate him with the charge of murdering or causing the murder of the FBI agent, Malik Reza, but they could not succeed in establishing that charge too. The gun that was found near the killed FBI agent had his own fingerprints, and no one else. Nevertheless, the police considered the cause of his death to be a murder, and not a suicide or an accident, and did not rule out the possibility of having been killed by someone else. The case remained open. Chapter 34. Mahatma Gandhi's Children's Shelter in Mumbai. From 4 o'clock in the early morning hours of Sunday, Rehana Khan and her daughter Ifat Khan were standing and staring at the magnificent Charity Twin Towers. The Charity Twin Towers had been constructed on the same ground that Rehana and her daughter Ifat, along with thousands of the poorest of the poor, and the untouchables, had called home. Uncounted numbers of street children and beggars kept them company. For the destitute, the daybreak marked the dawn of a historical day. Today, the Twin Towers are going to open their doors to receive the orphaned and homeless children of Mumbai. The charity Twin Towers had been built by an anonymous American family to provide sanctuary for these unfortunate Indian children. The benevolent American family had named the two towers the Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Orphan Children. Since the inauguration is only scheduled at noon, some of the attendees have decided to go to their places of worship and offer thanksgiving to their gods. Not far from the towers are scores of Muslim mosques and Hindu temples, and a single Christian church. In India, a person's religious affiliation is prominently announced by their name or their outward appearance. In the case of women, their clothes reveal not only their religious affiliation but their social status as well. The exceptions, of course, are the poorest of the poor and the untouchables who lack the option of choice and have to make do with discards. They have no addresses, and their slums have neither names nor numbers. They have nothing to identify them with except their human genre. Sometimes other species are more distinguishable than they are. Like many other beggars, Rehana and her daughter Ifat left the huge crowd and headed to their place of worship to offer prayers of thanks for the Twin Towers. It took them a couple of hours to come out of the huge crowd and pass through the many Hindu mandars and Muslim masjids to reach the only Christian ecclesia in the biggest slum area of Mumbai, known as Dharavi neighborhood. At last, the dream of Rehana's daughter, the slum girl, Ifat Khan, had come true. Although some followers of Mahound had tried to prevent the construction of the towers, they could not kill that noble dream. Many years before, the children of darkness planted 5 bombs, destroyed the construction, and killed hundreds of workers and their babies. However, the noble dream remained in the mind and heart of the former Miss World, Aphrodite Khan. Now, after many years, a wealthy American woman, Ifat Khan, Aphrodite Khan, Christina Lewinsky, Susan Johnson, eventually succeeded in bringing her noble project into the real world. No one knew the real name of the benevolent woman. Through her trustees, she built her noble Twin Towers. The world had soon forgotten about the child bride, the 7-year-old Indian slum girl, Ifat Khan, who had been abused by the 70-year-old man of Arabia. Her tragic story, which had been written in a book and acted as a movie, is considered something of the past, and no one remembers her anymore. Thousands upon thousands of female children had fallen victim to the hands of the same Muslim pedophiles, and like Ifat Khan, and suffer rape and abuse to this day with no one has done anything. Child marriages are lawful and practiced in broad daylight in the religion of Islam, after the example of the Prophet Muhammad and his child bride, Aisha bint Abu Bakr. For 10 years, Christina, her husband Michael, her mother Rehana, and her 2 daughters, Aphrodite and Ifat, went underground and hid themselves from the Muslim terrorists. Although the fear of Islamic retribution is always a lingering fear in their hearts, the family never abandoned their dream of building a shelter for the destitute. They took on all the risks and built the charity Twin Towers for the poor children of Mumbai. During those 10 years, Ifat Khan became so rich that her bank balance exceeded $1 billion. Following the wise advice of her loving husband, Michael Lewinsky, she started an import and export business between India and America. Her business was so flourished that in a few years, her millions of dollars multiplied until she became a billionaire woman. After her miraculous rescue, Christina Lewinsky decided to pay homage to her childhood name, Ifat Khan. She understood that all those years she was running away from her sad past and hiding behind many names and surnames. She also was controlled by the fear of the demons of Islam, who kept tracking and haunting her wherever she went. No matter what first names and last names she used to hide from them, and Northwest matter which place she went, they still managed to find her and attempted to assassinate her. Their last assassination attempt was carried out under a perfect and flawless plan. All perpetrators thought that only if she was in the Kabristan cemetery, then she could escape their well-masterminded plot. One of them said sarcastically, "Even if she was in the grave, we would dig her out and piss on her and burn her remains." When they kidnapped her, they imprisoned her in their basement and tortured her day and night. She felt as if she was in the den of lions or cast in the fiery furnace. God closed the mouths of the lion and his lioness and extinguished their raging flames. Then he sent his archangel Michael and snatched her from their claws at the right time. Yes, Michael was more than a husband and spiritual friend to Ifrit. He was her guardian angel. He always appeared at the right moment and saved her life. When she was chased by the Somali terrorists and sought shelter in the Jewish home, it was Michael who stopped her from killing herself and introduced her to God. When she was abused by her selfish Christian husband and her Indian in-laws and became despair and suicidal, it was Michael again who convinced her to walk out of that hellish marriage life. When her biological mother publicly betrayed and disowned her, and she became mad, and was left alone to die in a filthy mental hospital in Mumbai, Michael rescued her again. He also rescued her from the mouth of the lion, the terrible demon, Khalid Mansour al-Had, when she was imprisoned in Sudan. He took her through the valley of the shadow of death in that scary jungle of South Sudan. If it wasn't for Michael, she would have been brutally murdered by those children of darkness who masqueraded themselves as protectors of the society through law enforcement, but they were breakers of the law and dangerous terrorists. After their last assassination attempt, which she miraculously escaped, Ifrit correctly discerned it wasn't Michael but God who always used him to save her life. Her bitter experiences with those children of the devil, if had taught anything practical, she finally knew and understood there was nothing that could protect her from their evil schemes except God. Therefore, she determined never again to run away from them or hide her true identity behind pseudo-names. She remembered the Lord's words, which he spoke concerning those children of darkness: "Do not fear those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both soul and body in hell." Matthew 10, verse 28. Christina Lewinsky changed her name once and for all to Ifrit Khan, and convinced her husband to go back to his former angelic name Michael Lewinsky. On that historical day, after offering their prayers and attending the Sunday service, Rehana Khan and her daughter, Ifrit Khan, returned to their former home to continue to wait with other destitute for the inauguration of their charity institute, which consists of 2 identical twin towers. They were disguised as beggars among the destitute, waiting patiently for its hour of inauguration. Although today she is still considerably wealthy, Ifrit decided to come to the level of those poorest of poor and experience their suffering and agony. Her mother and she were once one of them. They lived and suffered like them. They were slum dwellers and poor of the poorest. Ifrit could not remember the early years of her childhood very well, when she was also one of the beggars of Dharavi neighborhood, since she left when she was merely 7. She left penniless, but God brought her back with a bank balance of over $1 billion. She stripped herself of all her costly ornaments and expensive clothes. She put on sacked clothes and rags and walked barefoot like them. Her fate in life took her from her family's slum, which was made out of the discard boxes collected from the garbage containers of Dharavi locality, and placed her in a cage made of pure gold. From the age of 7, she lived in richness, and decked with gold and diamonds from head to toe. However, she wished that her destiny had not taken her from among the poor to the rich and selfish men who used and abused her. In remembering those years of suffering and abuse, Ifrit's eyes began to shed hot tears in silence. She could do nothing to alter the course of her tragic past life. Her life took a positive turn after her destiny took her to that Jewish home, and she met the love of her life, Michael Lewinsky, the complete Jew. The man who changed her life from carnal to spiritual and remained her lover, friend, guardian angel, and true husband ever since. She never knew the real meaning of life and the true love of man until God intervened and worked a miracle in her miserable life, and her road crossed that of Michael Lewinsky. Ifrit had never understood the meanings of the words evil and ignorant until she forsook Islam and embraced Christianity. She had no clear distinction between good and evil, right and wrong, truth and falsehood, and God and Satan. For an exceptionally long time, She lived among people who mistook evil for good, considered the rape of an underage girl by an adult man as a halal marriage, abuse as an enjoyment, and draw pleasure from the suffering of innocent female children. She was blind and living in darkness until God used Michael Lewinsky to open her eyes to the light. Today, she has the most loving life partner in the world, and is living the happiest family life with her loving daughters Aphrodite and Ifat, and her dear mother Rehana Khan. The media had a field day reporting on the humanitarian project for the poor of Mumbai. They reported on the construction of the building, the benefit of new housing for poor residents and their children, and the kitchen that allowed them access to free meals. The media was touched to hear that the benefactor was also going to provide for their education. According to her project plans, the school was to be housed inside the building being constructed. The plans called for canteens serving nutritious food, laundry facilities, and a clothes distribution facility, a small clinic, and a hospital, among other benefits. The poor and homeless children would be housed separately by gender. The girls would be accommodated in a separate building from the boys. No child would receive any money, because the Gondas, gangsters of Mumbai underworld mafia, would rob it from them. The Mumbai Gondas throw hot boiled oil on the faces of homeless children to blind their eyes and disfigure their faces. Then, they send them to beg on the streets. Whatever money they collected would be taken away by those heartless thugs. Sometimes, they cut their hands or legs and force them to beg for them. Child abuse is an unheard of concept in India. Children as small as 4 and 5 years old go to work wherever they can find someone to employ them. The education of children is an option left for the parents to decide upon. Untold numbers of children in Mumbai are homeless. Those street children are easy prey for the Gondas. The children of the charity Twin Towers would instead be provided with free accommodation, food, clothing, medical attention, and education. The plans already called for a small private hospital in each building, and for a small army of doctors and nurses to run them. Besides the schools and hospitals, each tower housed a Christian church. Ifat and her husband knew that whatever they do for the children would be nothing if they don't provide for their salvation. Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, verse 36. The 2 towers were built in the largest slum area in the world, Dharavi neighborhood, Mumbai. Each tower was 17 stories high with 500 rooms, each housing whole families or children in bunk beds. The 3rd floor was reserved for a church, a school, a hospital, and canteens. The 1st and 2nd floors were designated for offices, shops, and a supermarket for businesses to rent. The rentals would be used to finance similar projects in other areas. Ifat had long-term plans calling for the construction of other similar charitable buildings. This first jewel in her crown would be called the Mahatma Gandhi Children's Shelter. The poor and street children would be accommodated on all 14 floors. Access to certain floors and the children is restricted to authorized personnel, and the maidservants and menservants only. The menservants and maidservants were employed from Mumbai's slums and chawls. The servants would be allowed to eat their meals in the restaurants without charge while working in the building. Likewise, they were all entitled to use the washrooms. In case of illness, they were also entitled to receive medical treatment and free medication. They would be allowed to enroll their children in the shelter's schools. There would be many security guards guarding the charity Twin Towers day and night, around the clock. The charity Twin Towers included recreation facilities such as playgrounds for various sports, gyms, swimming pools, parks, etc. Although India allowed child labor, the children of Mahatma Gandhi's Children's Shelter would not be put to work except for domestic chores. They would be taught and expected to care for their clothes, shoes, bedding, and other belongings. Moreover, the older children would be taught how to bathe, and take care of the younger ones or bathed by nannies. The children's clothes and other linens would be washed by washerwomen. The 2 twin charity towers stand like giant skyscrapers among the millions of slums of that poverty-stricken area. On behalf of the unnamed American family, the Prime Minister of India is going to inaugurate the Mahatma Gandhi Shelter for Orphan Children. It had cost the wealthy American family untold millions of dollars to fulfill their noble dream. Ifat Khan and her mother Rehana Khan continued to wait patiently. Among the beggars for the arrival of the Prime Minister of India, Ifat knew that her loving husband, Michael Lewinsky, and their lovely daughters, Aphrodite and Ifat, would be watching the great event on the TV in their deluxe rooms at the five-star Oberoi Hotel. About the author of this novel. Dr. A. Ahmed is an author and scholar. He has 5 university certificates, BA, MA, and PhD, in philosophy and comparative studies of religions from India, and a Bachelor and Master of Religious Studies and Philosophy from Canada. He was born and brought up as a Muslim, but through his study of philosophy and comparative studies of religions, he converted to Christianity. He has a unique writing style that can break through any religious, social, and cultural barriers and reveal the truth as it is. Moreover, his books are based on first-hand eyewitnesses, because he witnessed those dire conditions of Muslim women with his own eyes. He has written 25 books, but so far published 10 of them. His books have been written in English and translated by him into Arabic. All of his books are on the issues of women in Muslim societies and terrorism in Islam. Some of his novels are available on his YouTube pages for free, as he reads them in English and Arabic.